Hey, what's up, YouTube? All right, now we're going to go over the tech stack that we're going to be using to build this web application. So basically, this web application, it's just going to be a template for the uh, the common components that come with the web application, which is like registration, login, um, and customer-facing pages. The typical framework that all web applications use. So with that, the features, however, you can customize for yourself. I'll be building this um, application, which I discussed in the previous video about what it entails, and maybe possibly I'll build out the features and show you guys how I built those. But yeah, the tech stack we're going to be using is I put here Google Sheets. You might be thinking, well, that doesn't really, but I tell you, every time I build a project, I build a folder in Google Drive, and I use Google Sheets exclusively because you can have these little tabs for everything. Everything's organized. I mean, you might not like the grid and everything and the whole look, but you can get rid of this. You can make it look like a sheet of paper, like Google Docs, if you wanted to. But it's very easy to organize things and build tables and whatnot. So you can use it for administration. I use it for accounting purposes, all kinds of things, scheduling. Okay, and so with version control, I use Git, and I've never used anything but Git. I've seen the other ones, but I would say 90% of everything everybody uses Git. I mean, it's industry standard. Um, okay, and as far as remote repositories, I have a GitHub account, but professional work I use Bitbucket because they don't charge for private repositories, and I also like the Atlassian suite, which uh, which is part of Bitbucket, or Bitbucket is part of the Atlassian suite. Um, so that's also the platform that we're going to be using the agile development process with. Um, as far as your projects go, you could use GitHub. It really doesn't matter. But if you plan on using Jira, which is the agile development platform we'll be using, then you might want to use Bitbucket because they're integrated with each other. All right, so as far as front end framework, we're going to be using React because I'm pretty experienced with React now. I built several projects with it. Uh, I've dabbled with Angular for several months. I like Angular. It was the first framework that I learned, and so it was Angular from the beginning. I mean, Angular 1. So it was, I liked it, but then when React came along and using React, I prefer React. Um, I know there's Vue.js. Uh, it's getting very popular now. In fact, it's surpassed React as far as GitHub stars is concerned. But uh, that, however, didn't affect React's the in the real world the job opportunities that React offers. It's still number one. There's still a lot of startups that pick up React, so it still has the bigger community. So you won't be doing going wrong with React or Vue or even Angular, but React is what we're going to be using. That's what I'm familiar with, and we're also going to be using Next.js, which is a framework on top of React. Um, and why do they need a framework on top of React? Well, React, if you've ever done any server-side rendering with React manually, you'll find that it was a big headache and still is. And so they've taken it's a team that's taken all of the server-side rendering configuration out of the picture. You don't have to worry about it. Same thing with Gatsby, which I've used. I dabbled with it, and I like it. I built a website with it, but to me, it's more for static sites. And if I was going for like strictly informational site, I'd probably use Gatsby. But if you want more dynamic site, with hooking up with the back end. I mean, not to say Gatsby can't do that, but Next.js is more suited for dynamic sites, more for web applications. So we'll be using Next.js. And why server-side rendering? Well, because it it basically it turns your application, it optimizes it for search engine optimization. I mean, search engine results. So that's a big one. That's a big factor. Um, they say that React apps, they are somewhat good for SEO, but I come from my experience, no, it's not. You really need, if you want a presence on the web, you need server-side rendering. Um, so next is TypeScript. So TypeScript, what is that? Well, it's a superset of JavaScript. And why are we using it? Well, because I'm fairly new to TypeScript, so there's going to be a lot of places where I'm just going to have to research to find out how to do something. Um, but the reason why I chose to use TypeScript is because all the developers that I follow, they use it, and the way they use it, I see the benefits from TypeScript. Um, I see a lot of debugging that was unnecessary for my projects that could have been solved just by using TypeScript. So it's going to save some time, even though it's going to take time to try to implement it in this project. But um, once you decide to commit to something, just go ahead and do it. That's my motto. So we're going to use TypeScript. We're going to use Redux for state management, both for the web application, and if we decide to go mobile, it'll be for mobile too. So we want to create the architecture around both mobile and web, and Redux can do both. So I know there's a lot of controversy with Redux. I know that it's a lot of boilerplate. I've used it in several projects. I agree. I mean, I wish there was something better, but I've checked out the other libraries. They're kind of too simple. I mean, if you want just simple state, I just say use React state. Um, you know, um, use the context in React. But as far as professional, big applications, one that's going to scale out, use Redux. It's industry standard. It still is. MobX is another one that people use, but I'm not familiar with that one. So we'll be using Redux, and GraphQL we'll be using for GraphQL is a query language. So if you haven't never used it, it's kind of weird, but once you get the hang of it, it's a no-brainer. It's just a simple thing of building schemas, and then it's just like modeling out API calls for a user or for any model. But what you'll do is you'll do that on the front side, and then we'll do that on the back end. And from my use of it, I find it's just more intuitive rather than the clunky REST API calls. Where you're relying on clunky URLs, and people still use REST and in big production houses, so I don't have a problem with REST. But once you get with GraphQL, I don't think you want to do REST anymore, at least in my case. Okay, so as far as continuous integration, the big dog used to be Travis CI, but everybody's jumping on board with Circle CI. And my last project, I used Circle CI, and I found it to be great. It's very user friendly, and it just works right out of the box. I mean, you get all this functionality for what you want. And going on to testing, for the front end, we're going to be using Jest, Enzyme, and back end Mocha and Chai. We want to do everything with test-driven development, which you don't rarely see You can't find that on YouTube or anywhere else. I mean, people just don't want to either show it or they just don't do it. And you'll find that um, the bigger uh, the bigger web development companies, they test everything, and there's a good reason why. And it seems like it takes longer. It does, with setup and everything, building tests. But however, it saves you time because you don't run into tests or you don't run into issues and bugs that just keep reoccurring. And that's the big kicker about TDD, is that it solves that problem. Um, so I'm a firm believer in TDD, and we'll be doing that here. Back end, we're going to be using Node and the Node Framework Express. Um, there's other ones. I'm not familiar with any others, but Express, I really like Express. It gets the job done. It's small, and API small, but it packs a big punch. I mean, there's a lot of production web applications that's on Express. And as far as database, this is another tech that I used a while back as well, not Postgres, but MySQL. But it shouldn't take but a little refresher to get back into SQL. And I hear a lot of great stuff about Postgres, so we're going to be using Postgres. And I'll probably research on an ORM to use with it, because I'm a firm believer in object relational mappers, and it makes development more fun. Not fun, but it's just a more pleasant experience. And these here, React Native, React Native Web, Electron, these are just going to be like electives. These are possibilities at the end of our web application if we decide to go there. However, we'll be keeping in mind like things like we have to set up for the web application if we decide to make it mobile too. We don't want to set ourselves up where, oh man, once we finish the web application, then we decide to go mobile, and then there's a lot of things that we could have done to make mobile even easier and make our code even tighter. So we'll keep that in mind. But maybe we might not get that far, but I'm hoping to maybe make a React Native application out of our web app, possibly using React Native Web for UI, if we can share components there. I take that back. We might just build mobile along with, we might just do that. We might build it side by side. That might be a good exercise to do. And this is a big maybe. Electron is what a lot of people use today to build desktop application, and they say if you know React, you can build stuff with Electron fairly easy. So I've never used it, but I heard about it. If we go the desktop route, Electron is for sure the one we're going to use. But other than that, this is still a work in progress. It's going to be I'm sure it's going to be changing as we're developing out this application. We might take out some stuff, we might add, but this is pretty much the basic tech that we're going to use here. So next video, let's go ahead and get started. Let's hop on the Agile framework and let's start from the beginning and take it from there.